So just to define what we're talking about how much space there is above the coffee puck when you're making an espresso.
When it's dry or when it's wet?
Actually, when it's wet, when it's actually making it. But in general, people are talking about when it's dry, and then they see water afterwards. But let's just say you take a 15-gram coffee dose and you try that same dose in a 15, 18, 20, 24-gram basket. Each time you do that, you're going to have more and more space above. What Socratic found, and this is consistent with my findings as well, is that more headspace actually yielded a higher extraction yield. Okay, it also gave them less channeling. And so they didn't dive why that was, but for them, that gave them better coffee. Now, some of the theories are that the extra space just allowed for more even wetting. So I'm going to talk about in a second what I think that's right, because there was a criticism of our machine for a long time that we did not make really sludgy coffee. Like, people wanted that ice cream like coffee, and some traditional lever machines were better at that. So that was like a 2 years of massive hardware experimentation in the user community, including people modding the machine to try and figure it out. And what they found is that by bringing the filter screen really hard down on the coffee puck, they were able to make much, much thicker, sludgier coffees. Okay,
definitely. I've had that experience too. Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to Socratic. What I think is happening is that when you put water into a puck, it swells. Okay, and by giving it more headspace, it swells more, and water is more evenly distributed, so you get a higher extraction. Now, if you put a barrier away, the coffee puck starts to swell and then can't anymore. Okay, and so it stays higher density, so that when you finally then do rise up to pressure, that coffee puck is like this as opposed to like this. And essentially you end up extracting a lot more emulsion, a lot more oils, and getting a much thicker shot. But you have compromised because you have less evenness. But you'll tend to make a shot that is more chocolatey and less subtle. And if you're using a medium to dark roast, it's likely that you have some unpleasant flavors in there too. And that this technique will tend to hide that. So you'll have less of that burnt forest flavor and more of that chocolate flavor. If you're working on something medium to light, you are going to have a different set of flavors that you're going for, and a more even wetting is going to get you that. You're fighting different things. So so going back to Headspace, when we actually, there was a huge clan of people who really, really wanted us to get our filter screen really hard down to the puck, and I think 4 different decent customers made modification kits and sold them, and it was really popular, and people are banging on our door. I remain skeptical, but what we did is we made a kind of hidden community of the top experts, and we pulled them out, and we made a separate group, and then we had them blind taste all these different designs, and also use a refractometer. And in the end, it was very clear that while you could make medium to dark coffee more sludgy with this approach, and a lot of people who want that will keep buying that, the majority of people want more openness, more subtlety in their flavor. And the Headspace that we have does that well. So you also compromise in about 2 to 3% in terms of extraction yield by getting that puck not allowing it to swell.
Okay. That's a lot. That's surprising. Ryan here asks, would it not make sense to fill the headspace more quickly versus slowly? I'll tell my take on this, and you can shoot me down if you think I'm full of it. I think that if your puck prep is great, I think that a fast pre-infusion fill is good in the sense that the time between getting the top of the puck wet and the bottom of the puck wet is shorter, so you'll potentially get a more even extraction. But if your puck prep is not so good, a fast pre-infusion fill is probably going to make you channel more likely. So I've kind of felt like very slow pre-infusion fills are safer, but you won't hit as many home runs with them. Do you think that's valid, or do you think there's more to it or something else to it?
So I guess the first thing is, you and I have not talked about this actually, is I almost feel like there's two worlds of espresso. There's medium to dark and there's medium to light. And I don't even want to talk about general trends unless I split that world completely. Because how you extract one is really quite different from how you extract another. So if you don't have much headspace and you slam that puck with 16 bar and your coffee's nice and dark, you're going to pull a short ristretto that's super thick. It's going to be really consistent. It's going to be like $6 per pound wholesale beans. And the public that wants that's going to be super happy. And there you go. There's Italy, right? That totally, absolutely works, right? Super roasted beans, hard. It's not like the Italians don't know how to make their style of coffee. Right. And that totally works. Now, if you take something, and that bean is extremely soluble, so it does not need much time touching water to give out its coffee material. And also, unpleasant flavors come out quickly, but I got sugar here, so what's the problem? Right. And that coffee cost me €1, and I'm just going to go like this. I'm not going to sit here and think about it. So, totally different approach to coffee. When you've got coffee that's poorly soluble, right, which is most of the coffee that's not following the Italian tradition, there's a couple things you need to worry about. Well, one is you need to make sure that your coffee is all wet before you start extracting it. Ideally, it's evenly wet and none of it's breaking down. Okay? I'm sorry it's going to happen, but Rayo fanboy at times. Scott, without any data, you did go really far in espresso, and there's been so many times where later I actually had the data and I went, how did Scott figure this out? And when you made the blooming shot, you didn't really, I think through what was so innovative about it. I want to talk about blooming because there's 3 kinds of espresso I make now. And that's a traditional espresso like you got on the screen. There's an allongé, which you also made 20 years ago. And again, I don't think you understood what was so innovative about it. And then blooming. Now, blooming sounds like it's just an espresso with a hole in the center, right? So that chart that Scott has up there looks just like the previous espresso, except there's a 30-second pause in it. But there is a huge, massive difference, and that difference is pre-infusion. So normally when you've got a coffee puck, you start putting water in it, and it swells, and we use capillary action, right? So water is just spreading around. When it then finally swells the coffee puck, it starts to compact, and we compress. The problem with that approach is that the water is hitting the top of the puck much sooner than on the bottom. And Scott, you absolutely hated when I made Slayer shots that are like at 2 mils per second, because water hits the bottom of the puck 37 seconds after the top of the puck.
Yes.
And so what you get out of a Slayer shot is a shot that is simultaneously over-extracted on the top and under-extracted on the bottom, right? And you're like, nothing good ever came out of Slayer. Like, that's a bit extreme.
No, I didn't say that. You can't say that. No, I have respect that the machines are very versatile. I want to be clear.
Okay, but what you did do is I think you were upset by the fact that I was interested in Slayer shots, and you were like, I'm going to figure out what is good there. And there is something really good there, which is making sure that the puck with light roast is evenly wet. And what you did with blooming, and we can see it here on this chart, is you are doing 2 kinds of saturation at once. So on the one hand, so the blooming shot dumps a whole bunch of water as fast as we can onto the puck and then holds the pressure. And the amount of water we put onto the puck is how much we think the puck will eventually need. Okay, that's kind of weird. And then what we do is we hold the pressure. So this puck is being saturated 2 ways. One with capillary action, and secondly with about 5 bars of pressure. So we're using pressure to hard push the known amount of water into the puck. And that you can see from the 5 bars there at about 12 seconds. So we put a whole lot of water in, and then we got a little bit of dripping. That's what that brown line on the bottom is. So it's not a perfect technique. Some of the water does go through the bottom, and we get about 6-7 milliliters of dripping that comes through. But the end result blooming is an extremely even extraction because, I mean, typically like 6 seconds into it, I can see water on the bottom, and I can see it go out like this. So the differential between the top and the bottom is only about 6 seconds, even though your total pre-infusion is 44 seconds. So the blooming gives us the highest extractions in the world.